Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. Our guest today is Joel Grimes. Joel's work always blows me away. He has a very specific style, and that's really kind of nice in this day and age where a lot of people are taking pictures, but Joel's stuff really stands out. As a matter of fact, there's an expression that says often imitated, but never duplicated. And I think that always comes to mind when I see Joel's work. He inspires us to take it to the next level with a very, very unique style and really beautiful photographs. We can try to duplicate it, but he seems to always stay one step ahead of us. And I'm very excited to hear what his thought process is and how he's leveraging Luminar to help create some of those looks. So with that, Joel, I thank you very much for joining us and look forward to hearing what you have to say. And I'm gonna pass it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and show us some of your work and how you think, and then some Luminar work. So Good. Thank you very much for joining us, Joel.
But thank you. I get a chance to talk to photographers all the time. It's really fun for me to not only create images, but to inspire others to do the same. And if I look back when I was in college, my very first year, I was 19 years old, and I had this incredible professor, Lou Bernal, who really changed my whole perspective on how to look at photography. And I went from documenting the world around me. So I had a camera, I would go backpacking, I would take pictures of my trip. But it was Lou Bernal who really changed my whole sort of mindset. And that is that photography is also a way to have a creative outlet. So be an artist and have a creative outlet. And I've been chasing that for 40 years. And I was all landscapes back in those days. I wasn't a people photographer, but I could not wait to get out and create images. And I couldn't wait to learn. And I was just like a sponge, and I couldn't contain myself. It was some of the best years of my life. And so when I see photographers getting excited about learning, trying new things, absorbing everything they can, I relish in that and be a part of that. So it's fun. So I can't really, I can't complain. I'm in the best role or position I could possibly be in. I'm creating images, but also teaching and sharing with others. So let's see, let's talk about, I would say, you know, let's see, 10 years ago, I started a blog. While I'm doing this, I'm gonna click on some images. I started a blog. I wrote down this very first question. The very first question I ever typed in my blog was, what makes a great photograph? And then I kind of tried to expound on that. You know, as an instructor and educator, I've sort of had to formulate some thoughts and think about what do I do and why do I do it? What makes me tick? And so it's great to be able to be in a position to teach to where you have to think about what you're doing and articulate that to other people. So I am I would say a portrait photographer. I work in the commercial advertising arena, and I want to create images that are larger than life, meaning that when I photograph, here's Devin Hester, used to be with the Chicago Bears. He's a superhero to me, right? So I want to make him look like a superhero. I want him to look better than he looks in real life. He's probably not as big as you think he is. When you see these guys on TV, they look like giants, and then you stand and you're like, hey, that guy's the same height as me. But they look larger than life, and I want them to look larger than life. And so I do that with my athletes. I want them to build a dramatic portrait. And so one of the things I say a lot, and this is, I think, important. Here's Cron Clemens, the gold medalist in the 400-meter hurdles. Is that I want to create an image that's not reality. It's a fantasy, okay? So it's, here I'm chopping someone's head off. People really criticize me for this image. I got sort of both sides. People said I was brilliant and people said I suck. So I get that all the time. It's not everyone's gonna love what I do, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about that. But so I wanna create an image that's, it's a touch of fantasy, meaning that the lighting is extremely important, but it's not realistic. I mean, it's not, here's Blake Griffin. So I have a 3-edge light approach here. I say 2-edge, but 3-light approach. So an edgy light here, an edge light coming on this side. I have my overhead light filling in the middle. And so people say, well, that's not a very common lighting that we see every day. And I say, absolutely. That's why I do it. Meaning that it can be realistic, but it's, you don't usually have two equal, say, windows casting light on the subject perfectly. And so I love the drama that creates. And so I'm taking what could be a realistic lighting scenario, but we don't see it that often. So when I shoot my athletes, I'm creating a world that we don't see every day, meaning that it's a touch of fantasy. And so I get criticized. Someone says, well, that's not realistic. What I say, thank you. That's a compliment. I'm not trying to chase reality. And so I want my subjects to be larger than life and superheroes. So I try all sorts of techniques that, like, for example, this was a one light, just simulating sunlight. And I'm taking that light and I'm putting it about 30 feet from my subject, because it's got an 8-inch reflector on the no modifier. Basically, it's just the hood that you get with your strobes, the little 8-inch hood. And I'm creating what would be one light with a bunch of white, obviously bouncing back into the scene. But it's, sunlight, but it's not really realistic, but it can be sort of. And here's one I show this all the time when I talk about breaking all the rules. Here he is centered. I've underexposed this Karan Clemens again, underexposed him on purpose, overexposed the background on purpose. And I've created an image that is not a whole lot of detail on him, but yet I like it. And so that goes back to what I think is the most important thing, and that is to create images you like. Create images that fit you as an artist, that you're willing to take the criticism for. So I talk a lot about being an artist, and it's not easy to be an artist because there's always going to be a group of people that do not like what you do and will be very critical. And because we're human, and I always say we're weak, fragile, insecure, we don't like to be criticized. And so it hurts to be an artist and be criticized because you're putting everything on the line. And but here's what I tell people. If there's a group of people that hate what you do, there's a group of people that will love what you do. And so I create images for myself, and then for that group that think what I do is pretty cool. And so I get whether that's two people that follow me, my mom and dad, or 2,000 or 2 million or whatever it is. It doesn't matter to me. It's enough that I'm doing it and I love it, and I'm making a living at it. So that's my men's sports. We go over here. I got the women's. So this is an early image, swimmer. There's my 3-light approach, and building drama. Very early picture. Some of these are early. So I put athletes in old rustic alleys. That was when I was head of my studio in Pasadena. This is like one alley over from where my studio was. And so I think the best part about this whole picture is these hats in the window. It's kind of fun. But I dropped.
So Joe, let me interrupt you. There's a lot of exciting questions that people are,
Yes.
asking questions faster than we can say, hang on a second. So there's a couple of things that have popped up. One was with the single light basketball shot. How many takes was that? I mean, obviously you set it up and you needed to capture the moment, and a lot of that is, I'm guessing, the energy of the person you're taking the portrait of. But in any of these situations, do you find that you're doing a lot of shots to capture the exact moment, or is serendipity take over? And a lot of times once you set it up, it's easier to capture.
Well, all right. So that's a good question. So if you, let's say you're not an athlete, okay? You might be in good shape. But if I ask you to jump 4 or 5 feet in the air, how many times could you do that? Not very many. Because after about 10 of them, you're starting to sweat, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's an image of Karan. So he's a thoroughbred. This guy is like, you know, I mean, his legs are bigger than my chest. So when I get him set up like this to come out of the blocks, obviously he's a dropped in, this is a composite. Here's another one where I had an athlete jump out of some blocks. I know that I'm not going to get more than 10 of these. 10 times she's going to explode out of this block. And after 10, she's going to start cursing at me. She's not going to, it's just, you can't. Well, okay, so let's go back to Quran here. When I dropped him in, I put his foot lower. So when he was in real life, that was at the UCLA track and field, there was a cement wall behind him. I didn't even have a sweep. I just knocked him out of a cement wall. But he literally his foot was actually higher off the ground. He exploded so powerful out of that block that when I went to drop him in the composite here, I was like, that doesn't look real. Having him like, you know, a foot into the air is what he really did in real life. But that takes so much energy that it's, you're not going to get very many of those. You're not going to get very many of those before she's exhausted, even though she's in incredible shape, because it takes so much force. So here's what I do. I set up, I have her kind of like stand or kind of get in the position, but she's not exploding. I get my lights right, and then we do a test. Boom. And I'm like, I know that my first one is not going to be right on. I'm going to be too early or too late. And so what I've learned is I don't look through the camera lens. I actually look and watch the strobes blast on her skin. So I'm watching. So if I know that when I see that light flash on her body, I know I'm early or late. I don't have to see the final image or look at my monitor. I know I will probably, but I know that I can time it by watching her explode. So I want to get her leg up, her arm up here, her arm driven here, this leg straight. And so it takes about maybe 4 or 5 of those before I'm getting close. So then maybe about the 6th, 7th explosion, I've got it pretty much right on. And then maybe the last 3 or 4, I've got some pretty good ones to select to choose from. And then this was a client shoot. And so we could have maybe let her rest and then maybe, you know, 20 minutes later have her do it again. But that's how good you have to be to nail someone coming out of the blocks. And so this where is it here? I've got the one of Hope Solo. So here I've got Hope Solo. She walks into the setup. They tell me I got 15 minutes with her. I say no problem. I'm not nervous because I do this and I do it in my sleep. And so I've had my assistant stand in. She steps in, and then the edge lights are usually going to be right on the money. It's this center light exposure, my overhead light, that I'm going to have to either power up or power down. So what I say to people is that the lighting is an emotional impact to your viewer, getting the lighting right. So she's a beautiful woman, but I don't want her to look like, let's say, Troy Polamalu, right? That's maybe not the best example. Like here we go. So this is where this zone here is really dark. Edge lights are going to be about the same. So this lighting here is the exact same lighting as Hope Solo, only I filled in this center zone a little bit more. So if I do a beauty fashion shoot, I'm going to get you the exact same lighting here. Let's see, what would be a good one? 3 light approach. Oh boy, I thought I had, oh, here's one. So this is the exact same lighting, except, well, it's the edge lights and then the overhead light. But this overhead light is lit a lot more for a beauty fashion portrait than it is a beauty sports portrait. But this beauty sports portrait is lit a lot more for a female athlete than it would be, say, in this scenario. This is a lot darker.
Excellent. So, let me ask a couple of follow-on questions. The first question is, you know, you indicated that a lot of these are composites. And Do you have an idea of what the background is going to be, or is it already locked in when you take the initial image, or is that part of the follow-on creative process?
It's kind of like which comes first, the horses or the cart before the horse, whatever concept. To me, I sometimes have a background, like this was shot in Detroit in the old Packard building. And then it just so happens that not too long after that, I photographed Vincent. And I thought, wouldn't he be great to be put in what I just did 3 weeks ago? And so sometimes it's just kind of oh, I got a cool background. Let me see what I can do with it. So no, it's not as thought out as people think. I always say I'm not as smart as you might think I am. I just kind of put things together. Now here's one of Bobby. I went to speak in Kansas City, and I got there a day early. I got a rental car, drove down, and did a bunch of backgrounds, and then came back, and I was in Pasadena at the time, in old town Pasadena. They had a Ferrari show or whatever, and I walk out, and there's this really old vintage Ferrari a block from my house or my studio, and I snapped a couple pictures of that, and then I drop it in. And of course, I tell people I'm a bird trainer, so I train birds to fly perfectly in my frames. But anyway, so I put this all together. So Bobby was shot probably around the same time frame of like a month or two after I shot all this Kansas City stuff. So it's kind of fresh in my mind, and I think I got to find a subject for this background. But it's not as thought out as you might think. But that's a good question. I get that question a lot.
Well, I think a good takeaway is a lot of people assume, okay, when they ask you about your photography, it's about the people. But it seems like your eyes are constantly open for backgrounds and other parts of an image that you can composite just going through life. Is that the case?
For 10 years, I've taken my camera. Oh, by the way, this is not me. Just let you know. This is so here's an example. I'm speaking in New Orleans at an event, Imaging USA, and a bunch of guys I ran into. I said, "Hey, you guys want to go shoot some backdrops?" And we had about 4 guys in this little teeny car, and we're driving by, and I see the Smith tire shop, and I'm like, "Stop!" And I had already photographed Charles here with a tire. And I thought, I got to find a tire place, to put him in. And so that worked. And so this is like 2 years after I photographed him. So, but I was for 10 years shooting backgrounds, taking my camera tripod, shooting backgrounds. And I have thousands upon thousands of backgrounds. I am my own stock agency. And so that's kind of the fun thing about, doing this is that I've got options that I can use, and put people in, and it's fun. I think it's one of the funnest thing out there. It's just to be able to explore and try something. Again, it's not reality. This guy was not out in this field, but when I photographed this for a magazine, I just thought, I got to find a good background. This is Arizona Rangers. So, find something that was an Arizona background. And but I wish I was smarter than maybe I should tell you I'm really brilliant, but I'm not. And I just go on. And this is not a composite here. So not all my images are composite. That's not a composite. Whether I do it in camera or not, it doesn't matter to me. I got a lot of slack for doing composites. And early days, 10 years ago, I was willing to accept the criticism.
Well, so, I do love the fact that you started off with your presentation about being able to accept criticism, because I think a lot of people are afraid to put anything out there because somebody might not like it. And, you're a perfect example of people sometimes don't like your stuff, but you do. And that's really what art is about. Your own experience allows people to work and try things they wouldn't normally try, whether people like it or not. So I thank you for sharing the fact that we're all fallible.
Well, the thing is you're going to have to accept the truth or the reality that if you take a picture and you put it out into the public, someone's going to take a stab at it and tell you that you should quit and get out of photography and whatever. Someone's going to do that. And why? Now, I always think, why is it that people do that? Why would they take the time to say, Joel, this sucks, this picture sucks, this cowboy, you know, he doesn't look real, you know, whatever. The horse is not really, it's really a stuffed animal. I don't know, whatever. They'll say things about your images, and you scratch your head and you think, what in the world? But that's life. So you have to say, I'm willing to accept that criticism, and do what I love. And I like that. I like to actually now, as an artist, to be criticized, because I realize that I'm probably doing something right. Probably, if I'm ruffling feathers, I'm probably doing something right. Like, is this girl's skin really that dark? No, you know. But I'm creating that. Here is, this is a shallow depth of field approach. Most of these in Portrait 2, these are, well, there's one or two composites in here. Well, a few composites. But like some of this new stuff is not composites. But at any rate, so yeah, you have.
Well, speaking of that, a lot of people are interested to know what your, you know, equipment, not necessarily the brands of equipment you use, but how you achieve this. You know, are you shooting this on a cyc when you do the composites? Are you using strobes? Do you ever use speed lights, you know, lenses for depth of field? A little bit about the technical. I think people are very interested in how you achieve some of this.
Well, okay, so most of my backgrounds that I shoot are shot with a tilt shift lens. So I'm Canon Explorer Light, so I shoot Canon. I do a lot with my 17 tilt and my 24 tilt shift. And so I'm getting more megapixels by shifting left, shifting right. I get a little more panoramic feel. Here's a good example of that: shifting left, shifting right, 17 millimeter. He shot with a 24 millimeter. Usually it's a 24 to 70 at 24 millimeter. And the good news about that is that when I take the same camera and I shoot an expanded background, so tilting left and right, or stitched, I can stitch it too, without a tilt shift, but just stitching, I get more megapixels. And then when I shoot him, let's say I'm shooting him with a 50 megapixel, I shoot the background with a 50 megapixel, but this background ends up to be about an 80 megapixel capture. And so then when I drop him in, I'm not having to res up the, say, the background, or res down him to fit him in here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm keeping the resolution very similar. So even though I shot this at a 50 megapixel camera, it ends up to be an 80 megapixel, if not sometimes larger, canvas. Canvas size is going to be 80 megapixels. So it's like it was shot with the medium format camera. And so I do this a lot on my commercial stuff. And so I'm actually getting, let's see if there's a good example here. I'm getting more pixels. Well, I'll give you an example here. This is shot with 3 frames. So it's the top frame, the middle part, and then the bottom. And I stitch it all together. It's 50 megapixel capture. It ends up to be 120 megapixel final image. And so then I can blow that up. Let me go to the Harley stuff here. I can blow this one up to 60 inches by 90 inches at 200 DPI with no interpolation. So when I make my big prints, it is freaking unbelievable resolution. It's so beautiful. And I do that, yeah, all my Harley stuff here. So this is actually shot with 9 frames to get a 350 megapixel capture. So this was shot strobed. It's a whole technique I teach, and it's beautiful. So I'm strobing this bike with a big softbox. I'm actually walking around the bike, multiple strobing it. And then in Photoshop, I put it all together and make it into one final image. And it's just so much fun.
These are brilliant. It's funny. I just want to tell everybody, before this webinar started, Joel and he asked how long this was going to be, and I told him 3 days. And I said, I hope, he said, that won't be enough time. And there's a lot of folks asking questions of everything from how you shoot things to how you process things. And a couple of people are itching to see how you integrate Luminar into your workflow. And I'm going to have you switch gears there. But I can tell you one thing, the way we're getting questions and the way people are excited, we're going to have you back to go a little deeper on everything. So
I know it's a lot. I love to chat. I love to get people excited. So let me show a couple things that I've done in Luminar. Luminar is very powerful. Now, coming from the Photoshop side of things for 20 years, you know, sometimes it's, you know, you have to you know, give up, you know, some habits that you do, and then you have to, you know, but I would say this: however I can reach my vision as an artist, I don't care, right? So I want to get to the end result, and I want to get there as fast as I can. So time is money. So if someone comes along and creates something that allows me to do something faster, then my hat goes off. Say, you know, perfect. But here's where I look at Luminar. So let me make a statement here. Some people know this already, but I'm colorblind. So I don't see green at all. Copper, tan, green, browns, all look the same. Purples, pinks, violets, they all look pretty much the same to me too. So if I can see a bluish coolness, I can see a warm, cool, or warmish, like yellow, orangish feel. I cannot pick purple from a color wheel. I can go to the blue spectrum, but I can click on it. So let's say I want blue, but I'll pick on purple, and everyone says, "Wow, that's a beautiful purple sky that you got there." I'm like, "Whoops, I wanted it to be blue." So it's really difficult for me to finish off an image. So the fine last few steps are the hardest for me. Now, in Photoshop, you do have like a blue warm filters and stuff like that. But the beautiful thing about Luminar is you have all these presets of people that have done all the hard work for you. And so all I have to do is go click on my presets, and I can find this. And I go, that's what I wanted. So I go from this, I go, you know, this is kind of nice. I like it. But this was shot at night. So this background was shot at night. So I'm like, that doesn't give me a night look. How do I get night? Well, in Luminar, one click, I can pretty much go through a preset and find it. And I can do it myself by adding it one step at a time, or I can do a preset. So here's another example. This was what I sort of came up with as my, you know, okay, I got the basics there. Now, how do I make it look moody? And so again, that's one click in Luminar. One preset that someone else has already done for me.
And you've actually created some presets for us in Luminar.
Yes, with the help of you.
Teamwork is everything. And I also want to point out that you have a little cheering section of colorblind photographers.
Oh, that's great. So now here's a real subtle one, but still it kind of snaps. Does that make sense? That's the warm side of things. So here's another one, before, and a little warm, a little grungy there. But let's go into this one. So I'm going to show you. Oh, let me see if I've got. Well, okay, let me just do, because we're going to run out of time before I know it. Well, here's
and you're basically right now in Adobe Bridge, just as convenience to show us the before and afters.
Here's a before, after. So all I did was go into Luminar and do my black and white, you know, conversion. So it's pretty simple. But let's go over here, and I'm gonna show you kind of how I took this Harley shot here, and I finished it off with what I would say a pretty easy. We call it the finishing steps. So the first thing I do is I go over here and I hit the blue cold mood. Okay, it's under, I think it's under dramatic. So these are all free, available to anyone who has Luminar. And maybe I should just real quick say there's a basic, there's like a street, outdoors, portrait, travel, dramatic. The winter collection is amazing. And there's a cold one here too. Let's take a look at that one. And you can adjust the cold temperature even more. Oh, the wrong way. But so they have these presets. Here's crisp and clear. I love that one too. Now that's not going to give the cold look, but it gives you that snap. So here's a whole bunch of presets that someone's done, and they've done the hard work for me. And so all you do is just go say, okay, I'm scroll through dramatic. I go here, cold mood, and I say, I kind of like that cold mood. That's a good starting place for me. And so I look over here to the right, and here's what it's done. Here's all the, probably someone that was brilliant put this together, but someone that said, I like this combination of all these filters. So you have the saturation, you have the image radiance. Some of these I don't know that well. Dramatic, I'm starting to use that more. Clarity, you know, I like that, boy. Here's just a touch of soft glow. Here's a photo filter. So it's going to add that coolness also that you can play with. And then here you have tone. So then if you want, you can go up here and add another filter. So here's my favorite one I've been doing the last couple of weeks. Like almost every image I've been producing has been with this microstructure. And this is incredible. So watch what happens here. Because you know I love the sort of the structure, the grunge, the detail extractor kind of feel that really, I don't know what you can call that, the grunge, the grimy look. So if you take this over, so I want to pull it over about 3/4 of the way.
And I'm going to nudge you here a little bit, Joel. Let's take a look at this at 100% so people can really see who we're watching.
Okay,
you can either...
so I'm at 54, right? So I'm going to go to, woo! Well, that's pretty, okay, that's pretty zoomed in there, okay? And so when I take that, let's go back to structure. Let's take it off. So if I hit the eyeball and click it, it takes it off, okay? And it's already had a few clarity things, dramatic added to this, but this microstructure is my favorite tool now. Now watch what happens. It gives it the crispness. And you can play with the second line here, which is the softness. So I do kind of a combination. So let's go all the way. Okay, watch it. It'll have to process for a second. And then I'll fine tune the softness to kind of give me the look I want. Now, here's another thing that what people don't understand is that all these little numbers, like you say, it's 95 on the amount, softness is 81. That I don't write that down. Does that make sense? I don't say every image is going to have 95 amount and 81 are on the softness. I look at each image and I evaluate how much I put these sliders. So what I think when I used to teach Photoshop in the early days, people wanted to mark down every exact number that I used on all my settings. And that's not a good thing to do, because then you're not really you're not getting your vision, you're getting somebody else's vision. But you go and play with this until you say, I like it. So I'm going to back down for a little bit here. So let's just go down. And I look overall and I see the doors back in here. And I say, you know, that might be a little too much. So I'm going to come down just a little bit. I'm going to feather it. And I always come back to this. So I'm not stuck here. And let's go over to the filter. So I'm going to pull a little bit of the filter to the right, get a little more blue in there. I use the vignette. So here I'm going to add another filter. So we're going to get a whole stack of filters. And by the way, I can collapse these so that give me a little more room. Let's leave that one open. We'll close that one. We already did microstructure. Now I'm on vignette. So I'm going to, I don't know why I love vignette, but I love you to be sucked into the image. So we're going to give a little vignette. Let's go back up to dramatic. I just love that name because I love dramatic portrait. We'll give a little more dramatic in there. maybe a little more saturation, which I usually desaturate, but let's just see what happens. Watch this. We get that little bit more of that coolness popping there. Again, I don't want to play too much with the colors because someone's already kind of started me on the cool look. And I just know that all I got to do is pull the slider a little bit. Then what I do is I'm going to show you, this is worth your admission right here. We're going to find the sun rays. Totally the most amazing thing. Now, people know if you follow my work, I create sun rays by scratch, and it's very time consuming, okay? So I just clicked on sun rays, and I'm going to say, I'm going to place this sun ray where I want it. So I'm going to hit place the sun rays, okay? It gives me a little dot here, and I'm going to pull this over, and we're going to put it right on this light. All right, and then now I start playing with the amount. Okay, so let's just say that's way over too much. Okay, let's just take it down. Let's see here. We're gonna take it down a little bit more there. We can pull these back later. The number, let's say we got, well, I like a lot, or maybe I don't know what that is. Is that a lot or no? Here's more. Let's go this direction. Lots of sun. The length here. Watch the length. So I'm gonna shorten them down a little bit. And the warmth, ooh, we want warmth. We're going to add a little warmth there. The radius, let's see what happens there. We're going to shorten that down a little bit right about there. And then when I hit enter, it releases that little dot. And I say, you know what, that's pretty darn good. Maybe it's a little too much. So I'm going to take the overall down just a little bit here, okay? That looks more realistic. But I have a little problem here. Those sun rays are coming in front of the tank on the motorcycle here. And I say, that's not right. So what can I do? Well, I can create a mask. So we're going to go over here and create a mask, and we're going to fill it. And then I'm going to click on this little brush right here next to the eyeball, and I'm going to say brush. And then I'm going to paint out the sun rays on the tank here. So I'm just going to come along here like this. And then I'm going to say, did I do it right? So I'm going to go over here to eyeball, and it shows me where I just painted. So let's clear that up a little bit more. We click back on the eyeball, and that looks pretty amazing. So I say, look, you know what? I want to duplicate this. So we are going to, let's see if I can do this right. We're going to right click, duplicate. And it's going to give me another one. So let's place it over on the other light. And now I don't need to mask that one, even though it looks pretty good. But I can get rid of this mask by, say, clear. How do I flip this mask to white again?
You should be able to right click and say invert mask.
Invert.
Yeah.
That did it. Okay, so now I take back the mount. And then I hit enter. There it is. So now I have both my light streaks coming off the lights. And I got this. Let's take a look at what I started with. So there's my start. So you say, you know, Joel, that's not too bad, actually. That might be acceptable, but that's not my vision as an artist. I want a night look. There's my night look.
That's amazing.
All with a few clicks. And so what I look at Luminar, for me, is this final finishing emotional impact that I put to my images. So if we want to step back for a second, and we have to look at this important, I think, really important sort of aspect of creating images, and that is a photograph has to woo your client or your audience or your viewer. It has to woo them. It has to make them stop in their tracks and go, well, if I'm doing a commercial shoot, the client says, wow, we can sell more Harleys. This creates a mood. And so I always make this statement. The most technically proficient photograph on the planet can be a complete bore. So I ask people, do you all want to create boring images? Well, nobody wants to create boring images. We want to create images that have impact. So the single greatest thing I could teach somebody is not technical steps. That I do, I like that. But the single greatest thing I could pass on to someone is to create an image that creates emotion. Emotion is everything. So I'm sure some of my audience people here are musicians or played a musical instrument, or I hope you all love music. And so you have your favorite musician and you like this person or this band or whatever, because when they play their music, it impacts you emotionally. And you have to do the same thing with a photograph. So we get caught up in a lot of things that are, I say technical, but don't have any emotional impact. There's no feelings that are coming off, And so create emotions and you will win over a lot more people. And so, that's my little spiel on that whole thing. So that's what I like about this is I'm creating an emotional impact to my viewer. Any questions?
There's a couple of things you did that I'm going to restate the obvious for people. And one is, I love the fact that you just like to play with the sliders until you get the feel that works for you, that you're not locked into, oh, I must do this, I must do that. And that's just a great takeaway, I think, for the people watching this, is the idea that you are an artist and are looking at modifying till it feels right. And the other cool thing that you showed us that almost kind of blew by was when you were working with the filters for the sun rays, you actually duplicated a filter in the same layer. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that you can use a filter more than one time in a layer. And in your case, you built it exactly the way you wanted the look to be in one light. And instead of having to reinvent the wheel and trying to get it close, you just duplicated it. And so that was very nonchalant, but I think it's a really cool technique that might have slipped by. So, those are two things that really jumped out in addition to everything else that you've shown us. Your images have an HDR feel because of, how much detail is in them. And so the question is, do you use HDR often, or how do you respond to the question of HDR and Joel Grimes?
Well, it's a great question, and HDR has gotten a kind of a bad rap because we hear HDR and we think HDR is the grunge effect or the I don't know what you'd say, almost like it's tone bit mapped. Okay, so HDR is not the true reason why you use HDR, or you take more than one picture and then you blend it into one, is that you're increasing your bit depth. You're increasing the amount of tones and the amount of values that you have in your highlights to your shadows. So it's like the old Ansel Adams zone system, right? So that's what I started. And yes, this bike was shot in HDR. This is actually not a composite, but it's in camera. But I'm shooting the strobe. The strobe is going off on the right-hand side of the front of the bike. I'm holding the big softbox over the top. It's on a painter pole, and I'm holding it over, and I have my Camranger, which is what triggers my camera, to set to HDR mode. So it gives me a bracketed exposure that is an ISO. It's a bracketing ISO, not shutter speed. So if I was not shooting ISO, the strobe would put out the same amount of power value each time. The background would change, the value of the background, but not the bike, where it's strobed on the bike. So about 5 years ago, I got a Camranger. Maybe it was about 6 years ago I got the Camranger, but it was, well, whenever it was, I looked down at the HDR feature and it said shutter speed, aperture, ISO. And I thought, I almost passed out and fell down, literally almost fell down, because I realized at that moment that I could actually bracket a strobe outdoors to get both the ambient and the strobe exposure to go under, normal, over at the same time. And so I've been doing that ever since. I bracket the front part of the bike, I put the softbox over the top, and I go pop, 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 and then I walk around. Now I'm in the picture, by the way. If I'm wearing shorts, my gorgeous little legs are still in the picture, and I'm hunched over the, holding the painter pole. And so it's not, obviously that's not, you don't want that in the picture, right? But I walk around the other side, I strobe the back end. So I'm doing HDR on that. Then I step out, turn my strobe light off, and then I run one more as a background plate. So I've been I've kind of coined this term, I call it platography. So I'm working in multiple plates, and then I bring it into Photoshop, and I paint out my beautiful legs and me and the strobe and the softbox and everything else. And so I'm creating this. And oh, by the way, one of the beautiful things about this technique is that when I'm strobing the bike, I have all this spill of strobe onto the ground. And at first it's like before I was doing kind of platography effect, I would like, gosh, I got to burn in all this ugly spill. But doing this technique, I just don't paint in the bottom. I just paint on the top of the bike and everything. And so I get that technique to where I get the foundation. Once I get that, I flatten it, and then I go from there. But it's really simple. It may sound complex as I'm explaining it, but it's really, I'm taking basically 3 pictures, an HDR in the front, 3 pictures, HDR in the back, 3 pictures, HDR in the background plate. And then I blend them all together to make one final image.
That is a very, very cool process. Now, you mentioned the Camranger, which is a little device that came out, you're right, about 5 or 6 years ago. And that attaches to both the Nikons and the Canons. And I think they might have the software now to trigger that on a Sony.
I know they're talking about it. I don't know if it's out yet.
Yeah, and so for folks out there, most cameras don't allow you to bracket ISO. But it's a little cool tool, and it's really interesting. I haven't heard a lot of photographers talk about that, especially with that enthusiasm. So it is something for folks to look up. And then the other thing is a lot of people do ask about the compositing, and you indicated you're doing that now in Photoshop. I know you can also do that by making multiple layers and masking in Luminar. But of course, we tend to use what we know best and have been using for 20 years.
That's something I'd have to learn. I haven't done that yet. This is the funny thing is I just turned 60, and so my friend said his brain at 60 has been pickled. So it takes us a little longer to learn stuff at 60 than it does at 22, right? So
absolutely.
It just takes a little while to get up to speed on certain things. But like I said, to me, all these techniques mean nothing if I don't reach my end result and I don't make an impact to my viewer, make a dramatic impact to my viewer, emotional impact to my viewer. And so, like I said, it's not the techniques. It's the combination of you being an artist, having the end result that you want to get to, taking the risk to get there, and then putting it out there. And then, you make those choices. I always say that the creative process can be the most daunting experience that you've ever, on the planet, or it can be the easiest thing you've ever done. And the reason why it's so daunting sometimes is because there's so many choices that you have to make, creative choices. You have to make decisions over and over. Do I do this? Do I make that? How do I light the bike? Where do I light the bike? Do I put the glows in the background? Do I make the lights? So all these decisions, right? And so the biggest problem we have as artists is as we start making these choices and decisions, we think about what other people are going to criticize us. Oh, as you say, well, if I do this, someone's going to think it's silly or stupid. Right? And so you stop and you kind of freeze and you think, I don't want to do something that's stupid or silly. And so you get intimidated and you start sweating and get cold chills or whatever it is that happens when you're an artist. And then you say, I can't do this. Well, if you can get to the point where you say, I don't care what other people think, I'm just going to do what I love, and I'm going to produce it and put it out there. It's really easy. You don't have to think about anybody else. You just produce it and you make the choices and you go and you put it out there. And then, like I said, a group of people will love it. A group of people will hate it. And so I've had to learn to let go of what other people think. Now I'm still human, right? I'm still human, and I like pats on the back. If you say, Joel, you're amazing, thank you very much. But I have to let go of it. When I make decisions, of thinking of what other people are going to think about me.
I think that is what another thing that's worth the price of admission is that you do art for yourself. Whether you're using, think of the different tools as different brushes, whether you're using Photoshop or Luminar or whatnot. And I do know that, one of the nice things is that Luminar and Photoshop talk to each other very well. You can hop back and forth between them.
Absolutely.
And they both have their strengths. So I just want to get a couple more questions, and I want to take a quick peek. Here's one, painter pole. I'm just asked, what is a painter pole?
Well, see, I painted houses in college. That's how I got through. And you go to even like Home Depot or Lowe's or even like, Sherwin-Williams paint store. And there's a painter pole that you get that holds your roller. And it has a threading on the end. Well, if you go to B&H or you can order a painter pole adapter. It's a little thing. It's $22 or $19, something like that. And it screws on the end of the painter pole. I usually drill a hole through it and run a nail so it doesn't spin on me, or you can put Loctite on it or tape, whatever. And then my strobe will mount right on the end of that pole. And I can extend it out and I can hold it up. And I usually put my battery pack on the other end so it kind of balances the soft box. So I stand in the middle. And then last summer I spent 100 days on the road photographing Harley Davidson motorcycles across America. And I got pretty strong working out with that painter pole over the top of Harley Davidson bikes. So anyway, now just to throw a little side thing in here, I don't want anyone to rush going to, but I'm starting the Joel Grimes Academy. It's an online membership-driven educational platform. I sell individual tutorials right now, but I just did a whole tutorial on this process from start to finish, how I went and set the bike up, and then all the retouching and everything, how I did everything, the Camranger. And we're trying to launch this in about 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to have the whole academy set up and launched. And we have over close to 100 tutorials of all this stuff that I'm talking about. So,
and they can find this by going to your website once it launches?
Yeah. Well, right now, my blog is joelgrimesworkshops.com. And there's 10 steps to becoming a successful photographer. That's a free giveaway if you guys are interested in that. So, but I'll have everything's going to be posted on this blog to get you over to the academy eventually.
Will we get to see your knees in these behind-the-scene pictures?
My gorgeous kneecaps. Hey, a 60-year-old doesn't look too good in shorts.
Well, that's great, because that was one of my big questions: is if there's ever a way for us to see some of this behind the scenes, how you capture the pieces that you assemble.
I have a whole tutorials on just the Camranger, just HDR, just how to strobing the bikes, strobing people. I do HDR on people. In fact, I just shot a whole campaign for Chrysler, a Fiat Chrysler Automotive. We did all 6 ads. They were all shot HDR with people, with playtography concept, and I show how I did the whole retouching of one of those ads, and that's going to be in there. So I love to share this whole thing of what I do with others, and I've been waiting for a couple years to get it into an academy format to where you have access to all my tutorials for, I think it's a very small, price, the academy concept.
Yeah. Much easier than flying you out to their house.
Well, yeah,
feeding
we do that too.
Yeah. I'm going to ask just one more question. And as I indicated, we could have kept going, but there is, and you spoke about commercial clients just a moment ago. So when you are creating some of your images, do you create several different fields to to show the clients after or during the production process? What's the workflow there?
I mean, just for this Chrysler job, which I don't know if I could find it on here. One of the shots was, I know this sounds funny, I'm not putting a plug in for you guys, but one of the shots was a cool night-ish feel, or it's actually supposed to be early morning. And all I did was use this same filter here, cool filter, click, and I sent it over and they loved it. Literally one click. It was the final shot. It was done in Luminar for that client. It was a bunch of hockey kids in a garage, like they're going early morning, before the sun comes up, and we had the soft light coming in the garage, and I used this cool filter to use on the last step. But to answer your question, yeah, usually what I'll do is I'll create something like this. It's kind of a warmer, and I might give them a cool look too. Say, here's your two options, or I can go in between or something. So it's funny. Here's a funny little anecdote to this whole, what you're asking is that I say this, a lot of clients are really relying on you to solve the creative process. They have a preconceived idea what they want, but if you can solve the creative process for them, if you can create an image that's got more mood to it, you've got where you say, I'm gonna add a few little light streaks to this image. This is not a composite, but just add a little bit of atmosphere to this image to make it sell. And they didn't ask for it, but you gave it to them, and they're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. You show the before and after, and they go, thank you. And you're doing your job. I'm doing my job as a creative force. So that goes back to when you talk about being hired in the commercial industry, is you have to create a body of work, a brand that sells you're a creative force. You are somebody that when they hire you, you're going to make these images look really good for them. And that's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, so, I think that is a great way to wrap it, because people can be button pushers, and that goes back to, well, I could type in this number and that number and get a look. But in reality, they don't want a button pusher. They want somebody that can take these tools and notch up the look of the image and give them something that nobody else can. And I think that's what you've shown us. And just to reiterate the fast tracking, what I really like is the fact that you're leveraging Luminar's presets to get you close to where you want to be, and then just modifying and tweaking them to take it to the level of your look.
Well, and think about this. So you go to a preset row, and you just say, click, no, click, next one, that's better maybe, click, ooh, I like that. And then as you go down, all of a sudden, one click, you go, that's it. That's it. That's what I want. And maybe you fine tune a little bit. So it's your emotions that are being cranked up as you go through those presets and picking the final look, right? Your emotions are taking over. And it's, like I said, the person next to you may go, no, I like the one before. And you go, no, I like this one, right? So again, that goes back to being an artist.
Yeah, and just even things like, I liked how you found the microstructure filter and said, wow, that's right up my alley, and tweaked with that, and the sun rays filter, and really found a way to use that. A lot of people just throw it on and they're confused. And I think when where you pointed out that you could paint things in and adjust colors and position, that really is what makes it sing. So and I'm gonna ask my question, which I think other people have asked, which is, you've modified these presets. Do you then sometimes go and save that preset as something you may come back to that's a little more Joel Grimes that then you can continue tweaking when you're working with Luminar?
Absolutely. Well, that's the beautiful thing about it, is that, so let's say you spend the time and you do a few tweaking things, and then you say, I'm just gonna name it Joel Grimes Grunge #1. And then, or whatever, you can say the grimy look, and then later it's sitting there waiting for you, and you can go back to it, and then you can fine tune it. Even like say it worked on one image and it was perfect, and then you bring in another image and you go, you know what, it's just a little too much, so I'm going to pull back the structure or the micro structure, whatever, and and then it'll fit that image. So.
Well, that's great. Joel, I really want to thank you very much for your time. This has been quite inspiring.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.